Hi everyone, I'm back with another Hearthstone preview video. We're getting close to the last reveals, so there was a lot in this one, but I had kind of a busy schedule this week and also felt kind of sick the last day that I had free to do this, so I still feel kind of sick, but whatever. We'll get this done. This one might be a bit long, or maybe I'll cut it off about halfway, depending on how I'm feeling after reading through a lot of these. There will be timestamps in the description, so let's get started. First, we have the Warlock card, Lesser Amethyst Spellstone. It's a lifesteal, deal 3 damage to a minion, and you take damage from your own cards to upgrade it to be 5 damage and 7 damage with the later versions, respectively. Damage from your own cards like Flame Imp, or... let's see. What's another one? A lot of them? Hellfire. Let's see, there's Spreading Madness. There's always a chance of that happening and hitting you, which I don't know if each damage tick would occur individually, so if you get hit twice by this card, it might actually double upgrade the Spellstone, which would be pretty interesting considering the Spellstone costs exactly 4. But this is part of what there's a number of other cards coming along that will showcase that Blizzard is pushing the idea of a Demon Lock setup that actually works on these deal damage cards and the other negative effect cards like the Fell Hunter, or Felguard, or actually there was a Fell Hunter, but that's a discard and that's an entirely different thing, along with things like the Crystal Weaver, the Void Terror, and Dread Infernals, things like that. Cards that damage you that maybe wouldn't necessarily get played as their own archetype normally, but might be worth playing as their own archetype in the future thanks to the various cards that work with them. So Amethyst Spellstone is just the first of those, and I think it's actually just a pretty decent card in general. Oddly enough, 4 mana for 3 damage to a minion and lifesteal is... It is undercosted, but it feels less undercosted than a lot of the other Spellstone level 1s, other than, I think, the Druid one. So, I mean, it's not the best option, but you've got plenty of opportunities to upgrade it if you take damage from your cards. Now, that's another factor. You can't use your hero power for that either, so it has to be the cards that you play. But there is going to be a card coming up later that would almost certainly be worth putting in any Warlock deck at this point, so, I mean, seriously, it really feels like a new potential staple card for the set. But we'll get to that when we get to it. So overall, I do believe this will see a decent amount of play, and I think and like I said before, with the Guild Recruiter, I think we're seeing a new Warlock archetype that Blizzard is really trying to push with this set, which is not a surprise because they seem to be pushing a lot of new archetypes. So, next is the Bladed Gauntlet. It is a warrior weapon, 2 mana, 0 attack normally, and 2 durability, but it has attack equal to your armor and can't attack heroes. Now, that's particularly nice because the idea of high health minions usually have attack power either equal to or just under their total health, so having enough armor to be able to actually tank the hit without losing any actual health means that you're probably able to kill the minion. So this is an interesting little card, and with the other armor cards that have been coming out with Warrior recently, I do believe that we're seeing a push towards the old school Controlled Warrior setup, which, along with cards like Dead Man's Hand from the last set and Bring It On, are going to start getting really infuriating to play against. I feel like there's a chance that we might be seeing the makings of the next Kazakus Priest, so everybody be on your guard for that. Then again, saying it's the next Kazakus Priest would be ignoring the fact that Warrior was the previous Kazakus Priest generations ago, but regardless. I still like the card. I think it's a very good idea. The fact that it can't attack heroes is kind of an absolute requirement at this point. And people have been asking about if... People have been, like, theory crafting the idea, oh, what if Noggenfogger's on the board? Could it randomly choose another target? I think Noggenfogger has some restrictions to the targeting ability it has, to the randomized targeting, but I'm not entirely sure. So maybe that's an OTK setup somebody's trying to work on. We'll have to see. But for now, I think it's part of that Armor Warrior set that's gonna be pushing a lot of control in the next meta. I think it's gonna start as a control meta the same way the last meta did, but I almost feel like it kind of has to for a little while just to get the aggro to a little bit more of a reasonable level. We'll have to see. Paladin card, Call to Arms. Recruit 3 minions that cost 2 or less for 4 mana. It's a spell. It's epic. It's a nice deck thinner. It's not too terribly bad for a Murloc deck, considering you can finally start throwing in the charge Murloc and actually feel like you're getting something really worthwhile out of just pulling it straight from your deck, but I get the impression this might actually be stronger in maybe Wild? I don't know why. I feel like there's enough low-cost cards in the overarching setup for the game to make it really crazy, but I mean, we already have, like, this. You have 2 of these as, like, your only two-cost cards, and that card goes totally wild. Or if you want other 2-cost cards that can go with it, you could have Thalnos. You have Kobold. I don't know why. This would probably actually be slightly impeded by that card to a point, but... Oh! Knife Juggler. Pull out the Knife Juggler, and then maybe pull out another Knife Juggler, and then throw a knife, and then pull out something else and throw 2 knives. That's an interesting way of filling the board with stuff to deal with. So, yeah, there's some ideas and some really neat options here. That's interesting. Boy, would that be fun to pull out at random. And by fun, I mean terrible. But yeah, there are some nice ideas for this. There's plenty of nice 2-cost minions to pull out with this, 2 or less cost minions to pull out with this, but you're going to get your main value out of it by building the deck entirely around it, and I think the current Murloc deck actually works pretty well for that idea. So this one might see some play from that, but I'm not entirely sure, because I think the Murloc deck is pretty set in its ways, so it'll be interesting to see how that shifts. Overall, I think it's an okay card. I'm sure, well, pulling 3 things onto the field for 4 mana is actually pretty cost-effective, I think, so I still think it's just an okay card. Cataclysm. So instant Lakari sacrifice. It's kind of what this is. You're sacrificing your entire hand for it. You're not getting the benefits of this because you discard the cards after destroying all minions, so this guy's going to be off the field. Unless you can somehow figure out a way to keep him alive through a destroy effect, which immune does not do, I'm quite sure. Let me find the minion that gives immune for the turn. Is it Death Speaker? Yeah, Death Speaker. Immune, the effect of this card, allows minions to not be damaged. So it does not keep it from being destroyed. You could theoretically use it along with the corpse raiser, or wow, okay, I totally lost track of the thing I was looking for. The minion that gives a minion death rattle to revive itself, but that also probably wouldn't cause the effect of drawing the cards, because that resurrecting itself would probably occur after all the text on this card occurs. So you're giving up your hand, minus the occasional, say, Silverware Golem, or the, where's the 2-cost one? Actually, I don't have that legendary. Clutch Mother. I mean, yeah, those are nice benefits, but you're really betting on the idea of, if you can get this out, get this turn 4 and turn 5, summon that portal, kind of riding on the backs of those minions all the way to the end of the game, and it might work, it might not, but you're going to be sacrificing cards to get it done, so this works well in tandem with another card that we'll talk about in a little while, but for now, move on to Crystal Lion. It costs 1 less for each Silverhand recruit you control. It's a 5/5 with Divine Shield that costs 6. And it's each Silverhand recruit you control, so, you know, for instance, if you play this, it's like playing this card and a coin and then playing this. Like, that's, now it's 5 total mana to play both these cards. So, then there's the Vine Cleaver, swing at your enemy, then this costs 3. You've got plenty of cards that can summon Silverhand recruits. You've got plenty of new cards that are summoning Silverhand recruits to your hand, or to the field, or buffing them, or benefiting from them, so yeah. Still costs 6 mana, but, you know, you fill the board with stuff, so that's kind of neat. But yeah, overall, I actually like the idea of the Silverhand recruit setup they're going for, and I think there's a good chance of it actually being worthwhile, at least if it's properly supported. And I'm not sure if it has that support yet, but we're going to get into a few more cards that'll help with that in the future. So I do like Crystal Lion. If Silverhand recruit takes off, it'll be a card that gets played. Otherwise, I mean, a 5 mana 5, like a 5 mana for 2 Silverhands and a 5/5 isn't too bad as a combination of cards, but it does take 2 cards to do that, so I don't know. Deck of Many Things, or Deck of Wonders. It's obviously a reference to the Deck of Many Things from D&D, and this is a pretty poor card to just put into your deck. I mean, you just get 5 random spells cast at random times, and as soon as you draw it, it chooses a spell, random spell, any spell in the game, casts it at random targets, which it doesn't say on here, but it is cast at random targets, and you fill your deck with scrolls, but when you draw them, you also draw another card, so that's not a huge problem. Again, it's just 1 random spell at a time compared to Yogg-Saron's, like, million random spells at a time is a much bigger difference and a much bigger deal. Because, again, like, when you cast this much stuff at once, it can clearly have a significant effect on the game. We've seen it for over a year now. It's like for well over a year now. Yogg-Saron has continued to be a useful card. I still play it as part of my Miracle Rogue, which is definitely an unusual combo. At least from what I've seen nowadays, but yeah, it's interesting. And again, cast a random spell for each spell you've cast in this game. Deck of Wonders actually does work with Yogg, because the spells cast by Deck of Wonders, which the scrolls being drawn also count as spells, which might also count as spells being cast, which could also fuel Yogg-Saron. But, like, how much how much RNG can you really have in a deck and have it be incredibly worthwhile and have a good win rate? Oh, right, Kazak is Priest. Still, though, it's a really neat card. It's also a really bad card, and it will see play in fun decks that are kind of playing around with it. But yeah, it's not going to be like high level cool, I don't think. I don't think it's nearly as bad as everyone else seems to think, but like, there are spells that could be actively detrimental if cast at the wrong time, and any targeted spell could destroy you under the wrong circumstances. Paying 5 mana for the random chance of pyroblasting yourself is a little bit like when that's the only thing you might get is not enough to pay that much mana for. So now the diamond spellstones. They seem to be pushing this idea of Miracle Priest right now, because this requires 4 spells to upgrade. It's... okay. Honestly, the fact that they're random minions is the only reason I think 7 might arguably be a little overcosted. Maybe. Kind of. Probably not. I gotta be honest. I'm seeing... like, they're really trying to push what seems to be kind of a miracle dragon priest now, which I guess kind of works. I mean, dragon priests do work with the Draconoid operatives, and, like, they generate cards pretty consistently, so... but, like, this ability is more for a big priest setup, where you're not summoning too many minions, but you're summoning a few really worthwhile ones. And to be fair, a big priest that manages to play this card, even in its base form, under the right circumstance, can definitely benefit. I mean, Barnes plus whatever Barnes summons is 2 different friendly minions. You'll get both of those back very specifically if they're the only 2 minions you summoned, but there's some consistency for paying 7 mana to summon Barnes and the Lich King again, or if you manage to have Barnes pull Ysserge and your opponent wipes the field, you could pull Ysserge and, like, the Lich King or Ysera or any number of other cards that get summoned by Ysserge or Ysarge. So, yeah, all things considered, this is actually pretty solid already for the big priest setup. I'm not sure if it really works as well for what they're trying to do with it, which is the Miracle Priest, which we also saw that with Dragon Soul is built for that idea as well. So I don't know, 4 spells to upgrade is pretty expensive, but being able to resurrect 3 different minions for 7 mana is pretty impressive, and 4 different minions for 7 mana is nuts. So we'll see if the Diamond Spellstone ends up getting played. I think we might see it used in its base form in Big Priest. And again, it's also 4 spells over time, so you need to get it early. But yeah, I think Big Priest is where this is going to be most commonly used. Although I guess I could see it in some Kazakus Priest decks. Not nearly as interesting as Temperus for that. Dragoncaller Alanna. A mage 9 mana 3/3, which sounds terrible, but looks like it's going for big mage, big spell mage, with summon a 5/5 dragon for each spell you cast this game that costs 5 or more. Okay, by the time you get this thing out, assuming you're utilizing, like, okay, first of all, if you reduce the cost of a spell with the Sorcerer's Apprentice, does it count as a 5 mana spell? If you get a 0 cost copy of a spell from your opponent using Mana Bind that would normally cost 5 mana or more, does it count as a 5 cost spell? Those are the questions that need to be answered before we really see how powerful this thing can get. It's a neat late game finisher idea. It's also a neat option just because it's 5/5 dragons, so Priest can't just toss out a potion and kill everything. Although they can toss out and win and kill everything. So that's an issue. But again, it's a very slow card and requires a very specific type of deck to build with it. I'm not sure Big Spell Mage is a thing right now, and I'm not sure it's going to necessarily be a thing when kind of Tempo Secret Aggro Mage still seems to be a pretty good option overall. Maybe when OTK Mage rotates out, or if Ice Block goes into the Hall of Fame, people will be looking for new ideas, and this might jump into someone's pocket. But so far, like, Elemental Mage is where the newer Mage archetype that actually feels like it works, whereas this one I can't really see this working all that well, to be honest. So I'm unimpressed in terms of its immediate potential, but as a late game finisher under the right circumstances, yeah, it'll devastate. So I don't expect it to see nearly that much play, but I very easily could be wrong on this one. I think there's a good chance I'm missing the potential this really has. Dragonhatcher, 9 mana, 2/4. At the end of your turn, recruit a dragon. Do you really need a 9 mana card whose specific job is to summon Ysera? Or Deathwing Dragonlord? Because that's what you're getting here. It's a 2/4. If this thing lasts more than one turn, your opponent kind of is in a bad situation already. Like, I'm not seeing how this works outside of, like, a situation where you already have all the control, unless you really are just trying to build up to an Ysera or something. Or Nosdormu? I mean, could it be the resurrection of the legend that makes everybody only have 15 seconds? Oh, I keep forgetting about Malygos. Probably because I would probably use him a lot more if I had him at night, but I don't have him. But yeah, Ysera and Malygos, both good ones to randomly summon from this. Primordial Drake, kind of an okay one to summon with this. Not that much else currently that's worth summoning with this, just because it's battle cries mostly. So, and Deathwing Dragonlord, if you're summoning Deathwing with this, then you've probably already drawn all your big dragons, because there's a much better chance of it randomly pulling out your Deathwing or your Ysera or your Alexstrasza, which kind of destroys the point of having an Alexstrasza. Now, mind you, with the ability to Shadow Step, like, I think Rogue might potentially have some kind of benefit from this, or any other class that uses minions to bounce things back to their hand could benefit from this in theory. I'm just not seeing it being all that useful overall, just because of the absurd cost of it. Although in Wild, it definitely has a lot more potential with some of the other, with like Chromag, especially. But I'm just not seeing this being anywhere near as good as Blizzard seems to think by making it an epic card. Dragon's Fury. Reveal a spell from your deck, deal damage equal to its cost to all minions. Well, here's one of those cards that's specifically designed to work with that dragon, with the Dragon Master I talked about earlier. Mage at this point is kind of, in terms of 5-cost or higher spells, they have Tome, Blizzard, Meteor, Firelands, Greater Arcane, Glacial Mysteries, which we will count because we have to, Pyroblast. That's... I barely need 2 hands to count the number of mage spells that cost 5 or more total. And then we add Dragon's Fury, and I think there's also Deck of Wonders earlier, so, like, you know, I guess I can have all those on 2 hands total. I can get up to all the number of 5 mana cards, or 5 costs you'd have, but I mean, if it weren't for having multiple copies, and once the rotation hits, we'll have to see how that works out with things like Firelands Portal going away, and nobody wanting to use Glacial Mysteries because it's terrible, and Kabbalist Tome going bye-bye. So, yeah, this definitely has some incredible potential, and I do like the archetype of the whole high mana, or high-cost card, but I feel like Mage benefits a lot from some of their early spells being able to keep them alive until the point when they can start playing their bigger spells, and this kind of needs you to have those bigger spells in the deck instead of accidentally drawing them early. So it's a bit of a luck card. We'll see what happens. The amount of RNG you can control for this is Not great, but maybe Dragon Mage will take off. I don't expect it to, but maybe it will. Drywhisker Armorer, the Kobold for Warriors. For each enemy minion, gain 2 armor. 2 mana, 2/2. Decent stats for cost, as long as the battle cry is at least something. And, I mean, if you play this on when the opponent has a minion on the field, you actually do hit this pretty much on cost. So, yeah, as long as you're playing this into not an empty field, you're getting enough of a benefit to make this a worthwhile card, especially for an armor warrior, as is a thing now. So, and especially if you're facing off against, like, Shaman in the early game when they're summoning a bunch of Murlocs and stuff for their rushing decks, or Rogue with their aggro decks. So, yeah, I think this is a pretty solid card overall, and we'll probably see some play. So, it was quick. Elven Minstrel. 4 mana, 3/2, combo. Draw 2 minions from your deck. Well, like I said before in one of the previous videos, the biggest problem that aggro rogue has is draw power. Especially when it's for things like minions. And being able to pull this guy out turn 4, or 3 with the coin, is actually a pretty nice prospect. It's a very early card gain, and it's even more interesting if you can kind of set him up to where he can draw some very specific minions you're looking for. So, yeah, this one will definitely see some play. It'll be neat to see how it plays out. Like, I imagine a lot of people are probably giving this thing shit, but I disagree. I think it's actually a pretty solid card. Maybe 1 over the cost most people would want to pay for it. But, again, that effect is very potentially devastating, so I think it is actually right on par for cost in terms of stats. So, the Emerald Spellstone. This is the Hunter one, and it is 2 3/3 wolves, 3 3/3 wolves, and 4 3/3 wolves. So there's this thing right now that Hunter has. There's a card coming up in a little while. So here's a deck list I have, which you may notice all of these cards are spells. This is an incomplete deck list at this time. This is what I have personal access to in terms of current Hunter spell options. There are other Hunter spells that have been revealed. But here's the thing. There is a Hunter card coming up that actually is designed to be used in a deck with no minions. And in that situation, running with secrets, utilizing this card, might actually be necessary. Now, the bigger question at this point is, can you actually make a functional deck for Hunter with no minions? Well, people figured out how to make a Lich King deck with a very small number of minions for Hunter, so maybe that was the impetus for that design concept. Overall, though, yeah, not what I would call a great move, but I do like this card on its own. I mean, Secret Hunter could definitely use a little more board presence, a little more reliable board presence, and I think this could be a useful card for that. But overall, this is one of the weaker Spellstones, along with another one we'll get to later. Like, all the Spellstones have been revealed, so we'll talk about all of them with today's video. But yeah, it seems to go into that solo Hunter idea. I'm not really seeing as much potential for it overall. So, if you randomly get it from something, it's not the worst option in the world. Now we're on to the Rogue. The final Rogue secret, which is Rogue's version of Ice Block. After your hero takes damage, become immune this turn. Okay, so after your hero takes damage, which is a neat little caveat to this card, and actually I think would be... I feel like this is a more fair version of Ice Block, but it's also not nearly as powerful, because Ice Block... let me just go ahead and pull that one up, because of course I have two.
prevent it and become immune this turn. Or after you take damage, you just straight become immune this turn, which, yeah, there's some value there, but, like, it's just not anywhere near as good. It's, as compared to the other two Rogue Secrets, which were actually really solid secrets, this one is just okay. It's not bad, and I personally think it would actually be worth using. But if you think it's going to pull your butt out of the fire the way that Ice Block is going to, you got another thing coming. So, I mean, if you want a rogue card to pull your butt out, it's like to pull your ass out of the fire for a turn, you already got Val'anyr the Hollow. Just because gaining stealth is pretty nice. Having this and evasion at the exact same time could be a pretty interesting idea, and could actually play out pretty well, but that's neither here nor there, and remember, you can't have more than one of any given type of secret on the board, so you can't even, like, stack evasions or anything with Death Shadow to really benefit from that effect, so yeah, overall, evasion is the most disappointing of the rogue secrets, but it's still not terrible. I think it'll still see a lot of play, and it'll still be an incredible annoyance to deal with. I guarantee that much. Furblog and Mossbinder. Now this is a neutral minion somehow. Transform a friendly minion into a 6/6 elemental. See, I would have assumed this was a druid sort of thing, but either way. Okay, so 5 mana. Let's go ahead and compare it to an obvious contemporary. This guy, the Big Time Racketeer. See some play, particularly in Arena. And to be fair, I think Furblog Mossbender will see a little bit of play in Arena too. But Big Time Racketeer's benefit is 6 mana, guaranteed entirely additional character on the board. You summon the 6/6 outright. You're paying 1 less mana for the Furblog, but you already have to have something on the board to transform. The fact that the thing you're transforming is an elemental theoretically has value, but then again, most of the elemental cards are related to having played an elemental card the previous turn. So unless you're a mage, I'm not really seeing as much value from the idea of randomly turning a minion into a 6/6. Sure, Jaina could benefit from it, but outside of that situation, this is a very iffy card, and not all that impressive in and of itself. This one did not jump out at me as something worthwhile when I saw it, and the big reason is when you compare it to the vanilla version that we already have, it's missing the key aspect of being able to summon an entirely additional minion. It has to have another minion on the field for the Catalyst, and so it just falls short. And it falls short by way more than 1 mana, so it's just an unfortunate turn of events. Furblog Mossbinder just does not look all that worthwhile. Geosculptor Yip. Okay, remember what I said about Armor Warrior? Yeah, this is going to be a key aspect of Armor Warrior, but then again, so is everyone's favorite meme-worthy warrior legendary right now. Good old-fashioned Rotface. So, like, they're both going to be big for Armor Warrior. Huh. You know, we might actually see a small resurrection of Cthulhu Warrior coming up with this next set due to the armor focus. I mean, that would actually be pretty cool. Depending on how many armor cards I get, I might go ahead and do that. That might be worth playing around with. Could be pretty funny. Oh, yeah, it's good. It's nice. If you, end of your turns, you'll get its effect at least once. Works extremely well with Bring It On. That's kind of all I needed to point out there. Greedy Sprite. This one was just revealed pretty recently. So once again, we're seeing more mana acceleration, and we do need a little bit more of it, but I think this is kind of where it needs to stop, guys. This and the staff are both good. They're a good, solid end point for that. Please don't give Druid way more mana acceleration. We're rotating out 2 cards, and it's finally going back to being a reasonable amount of mana generation, or mana acceleration at this point. Please stop speeding this up. Big Druid is already pretty powerful. The fact that this is a clearly weaker version of essentially every ramp card that exists for Druid right now is obvious, so I like it. I'm sure it'll see play. It's mana acceleration. The fact that it's a death rattle is at least unique. And it's a more reliable new mana acceleration than, say, Pilfered Power. But outside of an aggro deck, I don't see much value in regards to this, so yeah, it's okay. It'll be used. Mana acceleration. Let's move on. Hungry Ettin. So, remember the whole thing I went on a spiel about Hungry Dragon compared to Greedy Dragon? Yeah, this is... I mean, that is a lot of health for 6 mana. But it's really not that impressive overall. I mean, the fact that it has 4 attack is about the one reason I don't think this is a terrible idea entirely. It's a little harder and stickier for Priest to get rid of. Heck, with 10 health, it's harder for anyone to get rid of. But, yeah, overall, I don't know. I think it's just underwhelming by being fairly generic, and the fact that it can randomly summon, I don't know, Doomsayer. When the set comes out, I'll figure out a percentage chance and maybe put up some... Maybe I'll do a little video at some point about the idea of random percentages for high-rolling specific cards and whatnot in games, so... Figure out, maybe in the process of learning a bit about the probability of it, I'll figure out why people are so into high-rolling decks right now and why they actually seem to be doing well. So... Ironwood Golem. Okay, the fact that it's a common fits and is worthwhile, because this isn't all that impressive a card, and I don't know why. Like, it's a little overstated, I guess. Wait, what's Felguard again? How much does that cost? 3? And you're losing a mana crystal for 1 less health. I mean, Droid and Druid, Jesus. Druid is getting a lot of cards right now, is getting a handful of cards that increase mana, or increase armor, and rely on gaining armor, but still, this isn't all that impressive a card, and... Like, in a taunt deck, I guess I can see it seeing play, but outside of that, I'm not really seeing much value out of it, so... But I have come across a few taunt druids recently, so... That's fun times. Ixlid, Fungal Lord. Another druid card. After you play a minion, summon a copy of it. This is probably way better than it looks to be. Because I'm just not all that impressed by the stats and the fact that it's elemental in an archetype that doesn't really benefit as much from elemental. But I suppose randomly getting it from the, let's see, 4 cost. It is a 4 cost that you play it after playing an elemental, and it summons another elemental into your hand, right? What's his name? No, whatever. Elemental... I guess it's a 5 cost, actually, now that I think about it. Servant of Kalamos. Getting this from Servant of Kalamos isn't actually too terribly bad. But Elemental Druid is currently not really a thing to the same degree that I would expect. I mean, I kind of would expect Druid to have at least some elementals. But they... do not. They do not have any right now. They have no unique elementals right now. Paladin has a unique elemental. Druid does not. So, elemental synergy with this isn't necessarily going to work. So it's just going to be kind of a 5 mana 2/4 that you put into your deck for its own purposes. And The ability to play a minion and get 2 is pretty impressive, but I feel like maybe a neutral recruit card that can pull this out will be really useful for it. I don't know. A lot of people talking about big combos involving things like Coon and Ultimate Infestation with it, and I don't know. It might work, but it feels a little excessive. They're talking about it with Twig of the World Tree, since Twig of the World Tree, when it breaks, gives you full 10 mana, but I don't know, I'm just not seeing the value in it yet. I'm sure I will be proven wrong. I'm absolutely certain I'll be proven wrong and that this is a good card, but I just don't see it yet. And I'm just not a fan. So, not that Druids actually need any more significant love at this point. They've got a ton of it. Kingsbane. This is the new rogue weapon. 1 mana, which is pretty cool. It's a 1/3, which is a slight reduction to the potential power that it would have if it were just a 1 mana, basically just your standard knife in terms of its basic stats, because this Death Rattle kind of requires it to take a little longer to destroy it. The Death Rattle is you shuffle it into your deck and it keeps any enchantments. So let's go to Bun. Let's go to some Druid weapon cards like Leeching Poison and Envenom Weapon and Blade Flurry and Doomerang and this and oh well, I guess. This is actually somewhat detrimental, potentially, but, you know, who could say for sure? But yeah, there are other neutral cards that can increase weapon attack power too, or can benefit from attack power, like Bloodsail Raider, or you've got Spiteful Smith that increases your weapon attack while he's enraged, which I don't know if that actually if that's actually kept. You got Freebooter, it becomes ridiculously powerful if you've buffed your weapon to a decent point. You've got Naga Corsair, Greenskin, this thing that gets stronger each time you use it up. This thing, which I think is the only way to actually get rid of it from your own cards. So that would probably not be a good one to play, now that I think about it. So ignore the Furnace Fire. But yeah, there's some incredible potential for this card to become absolutely ridiculous. But it's a really focused setup to get it there. So I like it. I really do like the idea. I think it's one of the first legendaries that other people seem to like the idea. And again, I still think that some of the legendary weapons are being horribly underrated. Rune Spear, for instance. And another one that comes up later in here, although it's not being underrated by nearly as much. But yeah, Kingsbane looks pretty cool. Looks pretty neato. I think it's definitely an interesting idea for a card, just the whole keeps enchantments thing. And I am looking forward to seeing them maybe do that with more cards in the future. So, hey, I mean, we've got cards that affect the stats of cards that are already in your deck, so why not, right? I mean, go for it. I think this is a neat little design idea that I hope shows up later a lot on any number of other cards, and I look forward to seeing it in the future because it really gives that idea of decks that buff cards something new to kind of play around with. So this exact card effect, definitely something I want to see more in the future, even if the Kingsbane itself doesn't turn out to be nearly all that good. So I just love this card from a basic design standpoint and the potential opportunities it opens up for new deck archetypes and concepts in the future. Kobold Hermit. This one is pretty straightforward. It's a 2-mana 1/1 that lets you summon any of the basic totems instead of only being able to summon a random basic totem or just fill in the holes that you have left. I'm not sure if you can double up on basic totems with this. I would imagine you could. It would make sense, but then again, I can't guarantee it. But it's particular to another card that we'll talk about a little later, and it goes into the idea of, like, they're pushing basic totem as, like, another new archetype. Like, they're pushing totem shaman again, and I'm not really sure how well that's going to work, but I mean, we do have a few cards that work really well with it, and maybe the Witch will actually see some play in the Witch Doctor will see a bit of play in the future outside of decks like my weird budget aggro deck idea, where I just kind of threw her in there as, hey, she's a token generator. I mean, there's some potential here. Easily defeat her by either dealing 4 damage or dropping a house on her. There should probably be a card to drop a house on somebody. Maybe if they do another Karazhanni type thing, they can do that. Kobold Librarian. This is a card I was talking about earlier that feels like a new staple for Warlock. It is a 1 mana 2/1. Its battle cry is Life Tap, without actually exhausting Life Tap. Also, the damage comes from a card, so it works with the Amethyst Spellstone I talked about earlier. This one is pretty straightforward, a good card. I mean, its stats are a little low, but yeah, it's just a good card. Straight up a good card. Doesn't need to be too much else explained about it. It's a solid early game mana, card acceleration, gives you good draw power, really low cost. You could basically tap turn 1. Works really well with Cataclysm, like I mentioned earlier. So yeah, this card definitely worth using. Leyline Manipulator. If you are holding any cards that did not start in your deck, reduce their cost by 2. So essentially, it is the... Where's that rogue card? Does it cost 5? Yeah, it does. Ethereal Peddler. Essentially, it's a slightly more magey version of Ethereal Peddler, and to be honest, I really do like it. I think there's a lot of potential for this to be way more useful. OTK decks might actually use this in the relatively near future, just because, like, oh, now we're not so heavily reliant on having, like, we can, depending on the cards that we randomly get, maybe we can actually play, maybe we're not immediately destroyed if we lose one of our Sorcerer's Apprentices to a Gnome Ferratu or something like that. So, and also, you know, you drop this, somehow, you drop Antonidas and then, like, cast some lower cost spells somehow to generate cards, and then drop this and you have a bunch of 2-cost fireballs in hand. And you start throwing them and getting more fireballs. And so, like, there's some interesting potential for this card, and I really like it, and I hope it works out a little better than Ethereal Peddler, which was underwhelming to say the least. Next, we have the Paladin Legendary that is not the weapon, although we also have the weapon in here today. We have Lynessa Sunsorrow. She's a 7-cost 1/1, which sounds utterly insane until you look at her effect, which is cast each spell you cast on your minions this game on this one. Thankfully, it's each spell you cast on your minions. But, hey, this card might actually be worth playing in the future. Huh? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? It all kind of comes to the point of what order cards get cast in as well. So, like, it's not too much value if you cast the Silver Moon Portal after you've already cast your... Jeez. Clicking around like crazy. If you're casting your Silver Moon Portal after you've already cast your... say if it randomly casts the Silver Moon Portal after it already randomly casts the Blessed Champion, as compared to casting Silver Moon Portal, then casting Blessed Champion. But yeah, just generally speaking, oh, it gets the spell buffs that you cast on your minions this game. That's already really good. It's almost kind of worth having, say, well, there's Desperate Stand, there's this would be a little iffy to cast on it. But we have a Hand of Protection, or what is it? Isn't there like there's got to be that Paladin card that gives, it's just a spell that gives, oh yeah, I'm in crafting. You have Blessing of Might, Hand of Protection. I mean, just some really basic cards that you may not necessarily expect to use in a lot of other games could actually really, really cause her to become something truly special. So, I look forward to seeing decks built around her. I absolutely look forward to seeing her splashed into decks that already are built on the idea of buffing minions and seeing how it plays out. But she's also a nice transition from the idea of relying more on hand buff to the more direct spell buff thing, because she's kind of got that built in, because hand buff effects don't benefit her, because you don't cast those spells on your minions. Like, even the hand buff spell that actually is cast, Smuggler's Run, is not cast on your minions. It's not targeted on a minion, so... yeah, I think there's some, this is going to be an interesting card to see. I don't necessarily think it'll see much play, but I do like it anyway, so there you go. Murmuring Elemental. Battlecry. Your next Battlecry this turn triggers twice. Ooh, boy howdy. There's some real potential for that to just go completely nuts. As long as it's, you know, not... well, you got this, obviously. I mean, massive reduction to your mana cost for your various minions. Restore 6 health. Restore 12 health. Double evolve a minion. Double Wind Fury, because... okay, that one's just kind of there, but 6 damage directly. There's plenty of options for that. Double Jade Golems, since this will be with Jade Golems for a little while, so yeah, it's... that could be a big one too. 4 2/3 elementals with taunt. That might actually make this not the worst elemental card. So, yeah, I think there's some real potential for... and then there's the myriad of neutral options. This is an interesting little card that I think will definitely see some play, but it's a later game combo card, so we'll see. I like it. I think it's a good idea. I think it's also a much better idea than just having a global effect that doubles your battle cries. So, having it be character specific makes me think that this is kind of inspired by the idea of, what if we can give a Wind Fury to a battle cry? So, I like the... if that's the thought process that went into this, then I applaud them for actually coming up with that thought process, because it's a pretty smart and interesting one. So, there you go. Oaken Summons. This may have addressed... this card may theoretically address my issues I had earlier with that 3/6 Golem. Maybe. Not really, in my opinion. 4 mana, gain 6 armor. Okay, that's already incredibly undercosted. It's like, that's an incredibly overcosted at this point. It's partially evened out by this. But again, what's going to generate the most value with Recruit is when you minimize the random chance. If you're running a deck with a lot of 4-cost minions, for the sake of benefiting from this card the most, you're still kind of limiting yourself. So there's a good chance you're going to pull that, and you're going to summon things like this, which are not going to have these effects go off. You summon this, which doesn't get its battle cry. You might summon this, which is actually a pretty good one to randomly summon, so, you know, not a failure on that one. Cryptolord, also an okay option, but you're going to get bad options as much as you get good options because of just the general limitations of the card, and I'm not sure Oaken Summons is good enough. I wouldn't say it's necessarily bad, it's just not good. And I'm not sure it's actually up to the level of okay either. Onyx Spellstone. 5 mana, destroy 1 random enemy minion, and play 3 Death Rattle cards to upgrade. And then it's destroy 2 random enemy minions, 3 random enemy minions. Rogues have a lot of good targeted removal that costs about 5 mana and doesn't rely on Death Rattle. I'm not seeing this being anywhere near as useful overall, but at the same time, you know, destroying enemy minions, not a small thing. Being able to reliably just say, oh, that's a really big minion. I guess it gets to die now. So it all depends on if Death Rattle Rogue can kind of be a thing again in the future, and maybe it can. Not sure I see it yet, but I've got Unzoth. I could probably play around with it if I ended up getting this card. I'm really on the fence on this one. I'm not all that impressed by it overall. But it's at least... it's okay. It's better than what people are saying online of it being absolute garbage, so... 5 mana, Possessed Lackey, Death Rattle, Recruit a Demon. So, once again, going into what I was talking about earlier with the random demon recruiting aspect of Warlock summoning your Dreadlords or your Doom Guards directly from your deck, or, you know, any number of other options. I mean, the only one you really don't want to randomly summon from your deck with this would probably be Draxus, and heck, even that might be fun. Oh, look! A 3/15 minion on turn 5. And your opponent did it to themselves. But it also works well with things like Abyssal Enforcer and Hellfire, to the idea of being able to kill your own minion to cause the death rattle, so... But yeah, I think the whole demons with cost thing, like, they started that process with Blood Reaver. I think they're getting more of the parts they need to make it actually fit together with cards like Possessed Lackey and Amethyst Spellstone, so... I look forward to working on figuring out a way of piecing that all together to make something really fun and interesting and neat. Primal Talismans. 3 mana Shaman card. Give your minions Death Rattle, summon a random basic totem. How random is it actually? Like, are you guaranteed to get one of all 4 if you've got 4 minions? Regardless, this is specifically a card to combo with something else later, and it's... makes your minions kinda stickier, just because the idea of randomly getting totems, but again, it's pushing the totem Druid... Totem Shaman... Druid... Totem Shaman quite a bit, and I'm not all that interested or impressed with the current setup for Totem Shaman. What with that, but... I mean, for a little while it might actually be worthwhile, considering Primal Fusion's still a thing. So, who knows? But I'm not seeing it yet. It'll be interesting to see when somebody can prove that anybody who's dissing the totem setup is wrong by making a good totem setup. Okay, now this one is nuts. Reckless Flurry. 3 mana, spend all your armor. Like, that by itself kind of is already, wow, this is death. This is a death or glory attack right here. You kind of want this as early as you can reasonably get it, because you want to use it as early as you can on, like, key early game minions that you need to get rid of, because if you've been building up a stock of armor throughout the course of the game, and this comes up late game, it's gonna be a pretty hard decision to make as to whether or not you want to burn everything you've got on getting rid of your enemies and also all of your allies. So, again, I think this works pretty well with that whole Cthulhu idea. But overall, yeah, this one's really weird. It's powerful. It'll definitely see some use. I'm just kind of worried about... Like, even in an armor deck, is this really the best option you have? I doubt it, but we'll see, I guess. Skull of the Minari. Now, this is being vastly underrated online, but I can see why. It's a start of your turn effect, which means you're not guaranteed to get it. It summons a demon from your hand, which means you actually have to have the demon in your hand. Which this is not actually that hard for Warlock to do, since Warlocks have this thing. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Life Tap, where they can consistently draw cards. But, you know, being able to randomly summon any number of demons that would normally require discards or mana crystal destruction, or would damage you for 5 health like the Pit Lord, is pretty neat. The biggest issue, again, is the idea of how vulnerable it is, and I do see where people are coming from on that one. That one is actually a problem, and that is the one reason why this card isn't just outright a good option, like the Kingsbane or even the Dragon Soul. Dragon Soul's cheap, for one. This costs 5 mana, which is pretty high, and by that point, I mean, 5 mana, you said the secret word. So, yeah, regardless of circumstances, this is going to be an available option, to say nothing of all the other weapon removal cards that already exist at this point that are a lower cost. Like the Ooze, or this Ooze that literally everyone has. So, yeah, I think it's more powerful than people are giving it credit for, but it is still difficult to keep it on the field long enough to really benefit, and I can definitely see that being the biggest hurdle this card has to overcome. Now, we have that Kobold from earlier that lets you get back a weapon that you lost earlier, so that's nice. But depending on how much weapon destruction players start running on average, it may not be enough, so it's defined by how much of the meta is affected by certain decks benefiting from their legendary weapons enough to make those legendary weapons something that people are trying to get rid of. So, if the warrior weapon ends up being amazing, and Armor Warrior ends up taking over the meta somehow, a lot of extra weapon destruction might be thrown in because warriors have other weapons worth using aside from just whatever legendary they happen to have. And in that situation, Skull of Man'ari is absolutely crushed under the weight of another class just dominating with a weapon. So, this card's greatest potential will pretty much entirely depend on what other people are playing in other types of decks that get popular. Because if weapon destruction becomes near mandatory, this card becomes near useless. Here's that Hunter card I was talking about earlier. 6 mana, summon an animal companion, or 2 if your deck has no minions. Okay, 6 mana to summon 2 animal companions is kind of how much mana animal companions are worth. Now, if it said 2 different animal companions, then this would actually be a lot weaker. But the fact that you could potentially summon 2 hoggers, or huffers, jeez, or 2 of the buff things, if you happen to have like a field full of pugs, could actually be pretty powerful. But again, like, it's not a good card. It's just not a good card. It isn't. It's not a good card. It's not really viable. I don't see it seeing much play. Like, people, it'll be used in like in minion free decks. Actually, some hunters might play around with it if we're talking like all cards. What with being able to have other secrets, or well, the Bear Trap is a nice secret. The things like Quick Shot, Glaive Zuka, not actually a bad option there. But like, just in terms of what's actually available for just spells, I don't know. Just not seeing it really benefiting too much. I mean, I guess something like Cobra Shot might be nice. But yeah, overall, just not impressed with it in normal. Maybe in wild there will be a pretty impressive use for it, but yeah. Twilight's Call. Summon 1/1 copies of 2 friendly Death Rattle minions that died this game. Obviously, you're just going for the Death Rattles, which... Okay, that seems to have some interesting implications for Awaken the Makers, considering that, again, it's summon Death Rattle minions, which means this counts as 2 Death Rattle minions for fairly low cost. But, I mean, you can summon Crystalline Oracle. There's a lot of Death Rattle minions you can summon. I don't really need to go into all of them. Shifting Shade. This one's a personal favorite. And of course the Tortollan, which is incredibly annoying to get rid of. You know, good stuff overall, but... God. Yeah, this one will get play. This one will see a decent amount of play. If Death Rattle Priest Quest gets played a bit more, this will definitely see way more play than that, but overall it's alright. Maybe it's great under the right circumstances. Unidentified Shield. So here's our last of the unidentified cards. It's 6 mana for 5 armor, which is twice the normal cost for 5 armor and a card. So the bonus effects better be really good, right? Well, it's either gain 15 armor, which actually is pretty well costed. It's gain 5 armor, deal 5 damage, which is basically a double a more powerful version of Bash. Not as powerful as Bash, really, in terms of mana efficiency, but not terrible either. The Runed Shield, which summons a 5/5 Golem and gains you 5 armor, that is actually pretty well on cost, I would say. And of course, personal favorite, the Spiked Shield, which gains 5 armor and gives you the Spiked Shield, with which you can smash your opponent's face with a shield. Overall, though, the Unidentified Shield is an okay card. For a common, I'd say it's actually not too bad. A lot of players are going to have it. I wouldn't be surprised to see it very much in the current Armor Warrior idea. So we'll, again, I think a lot of it comes down to whether or not Noggin Fogger lets you bladed Gauntlet your opponent in the face, but I highly doubt that. Moving on to this card, Unstable Evolution. Because we couldn't just let Evolve mostly die, like decent people. We had to keep pushing. You just had to keep doing it. But to be fair, this one is way better. It's way more balanced, but it's also a lot more interesting in terms of the potential it has to really shift the power around and benefit as many minions as possible. So you can double evolve cards, you can triple evolve cards, you can just, like, if you randomly get a Doomsayer from your 1 mana evolving, oh crap, well, I have another mana so I can, you know, fix that problem. I mean, it's very powerful, but it's not a easy card to just throw and use without thought. There's some strategy and a little more complexity to the idea of when you use it, how you use it, if you need to use it a lot, if you want to use it early, if you want to use it late game when you can just kind of flood the board with 10 manas. So I really like it in terms of a strategic potential, and I think it's a much better direction for Shaman Evolution to go in than the just evolve everything cards. So I'm happy to see this, and it's a good card. It will see a ton of play. It's a fantastic card, like top class. It will see a lot of play, and it's worth using for sure. Looks like those looks like the old Skulking Geist will get a little bit more time in the spotlight, huh? Jade Idol. Like, that's the biggest point of Skulking Geist. I think it's really more valuable against, like, Evolve, personally, but that's just me. The Paladin legendary weapon, Val'anyr. Okay, so this is a legendary weapon that actually is a legendary weapon that players in World of Warcraft can equip. So, points for that. Aside from Medivh Staff Atesh, we have not actually had that in the game, and Atesh isn't actually just a card you have. You play Medivh to equip it. And also, Val'anyr was probably a card that a lot more players actually got to use, since it's still actually in the game right now. You can still get this in WoW, as far as I know. Its death rattle effect is hand buffing, which is neat. It rarely gets hand buff to specific cards. When the rotation hits, hand buff will be less of a thing. This is a neat way to go with it. Give the minion in your hand +4/+2, and when that minion dies, you re-equip Val'anyr. So, a key aspect of the way that this card is going to benefit is getting it in situations where you know that your opponent has little choice but to kill the minion that you played, or they can't do anything about it, and like you can crash it into something much bigger, kill that, and then, oh look, I've got my hammer back, and now I get to hit you in the face again. I got my mace back, I get to hit you in the face again. So, I like the idea of the way that the hand buff works on this. I like the fact that it's +4/+2 as per the stats, essentially equipping the weapon on the minion. But at the same time, what I like about that is it's not an even number in both categories for a hand buff card, which is unique to this card, actually. I don't think any other hand buff card actually gives, like, plus attack and plus defense that are different. So, and again, it's got death rattle, so, like, removal is a lot less powerful for a decent number of these cards than people were expecting, and again, I think that may be an active decision to play around the idea that pretty much the moment you think, oh, we're going to give legendary weapons to every player, the first, like, every hand in the room for the design shot up and said, what about Leroy, or what about Harrison Jones? And, like, that became an element of, oh, well, I wonder how we're going to deal with that. Oh yeah, death rattles. We're going to give death rattles to a lot of these. So, yeah, I think it's a good design decision in terms of the way it's set up. Vulgar Homunculus. 2 mana, 2/4, decent cost for the effect. Overall, the least impressive of the new damage your hero for cost benefit sort of thing. It is a demon, which is nice. That helps. That helps it a little. Makes it resummonable. So, I mean, not terrible. It's okay. It's not good. It's just okay. Windshear Stormcaller. So, all that totem stuff I mentioned earlier, this is what it was for. Windshear Stormcaller is a 5 mana 5/5. Already pretty okay for cost. The battle cry is pretty particular, though. However, its effect is rather interesting and rather fun. So, card's already in the game. He's the weakest of the 4 elemental lords, and the other 3 won't let him forget it. But he's also the one that's easiest to summon now in terms of his crazy idea of, oh look, Alakir the Windlord is now able to be summoned by just having 4 basic totems. If you control all 4 basic totems, which isn't even that hard to do at this point, because of that card I mentioned earlier, the 3 mana, give everything a death rattle, yeah, that could pretty easily turn into, oh look, I had 4 minions on the field. Oh look, 4 basic totems. I got all of them. Plop. Throw this. Alakir appears immediately. Turn 5, potentially. He's got Wind Fury, Charge, Divine Shield, Taunt. He is really quite good. So yeah, I like the idea of this card. I don't necessarily think this is going to be as commonly played, but it'll be interesting to see decks that are actually playing around with this, so. Is it a powerful card? It's really situational. But I really like it, and I really want to see decks play with it, so. Again, it all depends on the idea of how the random basic totems are summoned in terms of, like, is it always going to try and fill in the holes in your line, which seems to be the case, or is it going to just... or is it going to randomly double up and screw you over? So, and that is it for all the cards that have been revealed up to this point. Thanks for watching this slightly longer than usual one. And we'll be back with one more video in the future once all the cards have been revealed for the last set of cards to be put up. So, thanks for watching, and I will see you again in the future.
have a good evening, good day, good times, whatever. Bye.